foggy night, shadows creeping slow, whispers in the wind, where Johnny go? Blood on the hay, pitchfork gleam, midnight moon, a witness to a scream, barn doors creaking, secrets kept tight. Old man Joe seen a deadly sight, no justice found, just a broken plow, crows peck the ground, dead man's vow. Murder in the meadow, lies thick as dust, promises shattered, betrayed by trust, chaos in the cornfields.
Jamie here from Country Diggers. Today we're going to be reading in the Bloody Century 2, More Tales of Murder in 19th Century America by Robert Wilhelm. He also does the murderbygaslight.com website. And today we'll be talking about Lizzie Halliday. She was the worst woman on earth. All right. Murder by a Maniac. The worst woman on earth. When two bodies were found in a hayloft on Paul Halliday's farm in the town of Mamakating in New York's Catskill Mountains, his young gypsy wife Lizzie became the prime suspect in their murders. It was not the first time Lizzie Halliday had been accused of murder, and it would not be the last. In court, she would tear her clothes and babble incoherently. In captivity, she was a danger to herself and everyone around her. Though she exhibited all the signs of a woman who was violently insane, many believed that Lizzie was merely a gifted actress. But no one disagreed when the press crowned Lizzie Halliday the worst woman on earth. Date, August 1893. Location, Mamakating, New York. Victims, Margaret McQuillan, Sarah McQuillan, Paul Halliday. Cause of death, gunshot. Accused, Lizzie Halliday. Paul Halliday, a Union Army veteran, bought a farm in Sullivan County after the war, and there he and his wife raised 5 children. By the end of the 1880s, his wife had died, and 4 of his children had married and moved away, leaving Halliday with no one for company but a mentally handicapped son. He lost all interest in life. His only business was making charcoal, but he spent the small income it generated at the local tavern. Halliday's life changed drastically when he hired a young Irish girl named Lizzie Brown as a live-in housekeeper. A romance developed between Halliday and Lizzie. They soon married, although Mr. Halliday was at least 40 years older than his new bride. The neighbors laughed at Halliday behind his back, but they grew to fear his young bride. She was a short, stout woman with reddish hair and a pointed nose. Her most disturbing features were her dark blue eyes, sunken under heavy brows, giving the appearance of a serpent's eyes. She had an erratic disposition and was known to wander through the woods late at night. The neighbors believed she was a gypsy and studiously avoided her. About 2 years after the marriage, the Hallidays' farmhouse caught fire. Mrs. Halliday ran to alert the neighbors, but it was too late. The house burned to the ground, and Halliday's son was burned to death inside it. The neighbors knew that Lizzie hated the son, and they believed that she had deliberately started the fire to kill him, or had murdered him in the house and set it ablaze to hide her crime. Lizzie was arrested, but there was not enough evidence to hold her. A year later, she was arrested again, along with an unnamed man, for stealing horses. This time, the court declared her insane and committed her to the Middletown Asylum. She was transferred to the Auburn Asylum, and on the trip she turned violent, smashing the windows of the omnibus and attacking the sheriff. She was moved again to the Magdalene Asylum, and she was violent there as well. But when the case against her for horse theft was dismissed, Lizzie showed a marked improvement in her mental health. The doctors declared her cured, and her husband came and took her back to the farm. Many believe that Lizzie was never insane. She had only faked her behavior to avoid punishment. It was a sentiment that would dog Lizzie for the rest of her life. The New York Herald described it this way: hers was a remarkable career, showing that she possessed either a wonderful aptitude for crime or a strangely disturbed mind. Perhaps both of these endowments were hers. While the neighbors in Mamakating stayed away from the Hallidays, they kept an eye on their movements, expecting more violence from Lizzie. In August 1893, they noticed that Paul Halliday had been absent from his farm for several successive days. When a group of neighbors, including another of Halliday's sons, asked Lizzie where her husband was, she said he had gone to Bloomingburg to do some masonry work. The men did not believe this and went to the Justice of Peace for a search warrant. Inside the house, they found a piece of carpet freshly stained with blood and a spent cartridge from a revolver, and a piece of blood-stained rope. Lizzie turned violent again and hit one of the men on the head with a board. They managed to calm her down, and she agreed to take her stepson to Bloomingburg and show him that Paul Halliday was not dead. While they were gone, the search party continued looking for a revolver and any more signs of foul play. In the barn, they found a large amount of hay recently piled against the wall, and they began digging through it, expecting to find the body of Paul Halliday. Excuse me. To their astonishment, what they found were the bodies of two women, one middle-aged, one younger, riddled with bullets and badly decomposed. Their hands were tied across their chest, and their feet and knees were bound with ropes. They brought Lizzie back to Mamakating and held an inquest on the murders. Throughout the proceedings, she behaved in an insane manner, tearing at her clothes and making irrelevant remarks, oblivious to any questions asked her. The inquest was inconclusive. Lizzie was held as a witness, and the debate continued over whether she was truly insane or merely faking insanity. The following day, the bodies were positively identified as Mrs. Margaret McQuillan and her daughter Sarah. They had worked for the Hallidays. The search of the farm continued, uncovering two .38 caliber pistols. Then, under the floorboards of the kitchen, searchers found the body of Paul Halliday with a fractured skull and 3 bullet wounds to his chest, and bound as the others had been. The same day, Lizzie attempted suicide in her jail cell. She removed her garter, broke it, and then twisted around her neck, pulling with all her strength. The suicide attempt failed, but authorities continued to fear for her safety, both inside and outside the jail. It was reported that a band of gypsies had arrived at the Hallidays' house and declared that they were going to have the woman. Also, a group of local citizens formed a lynch mob and declared their intention to have Lizzie as well. Neither of these groups made good on their plans, and the excitement subsided after Halliday's funeral. Trial, June 17th, 1894. Lizzie Halliday was indicted on 3 counts of murder, and a trial was planned for the following spring. In the interim, she was still making news as details of her life in Ireland emerged. According to Paul Halliday's son, Robert, Lizzie had come from Ulster, in the north of Ireland. She told him she had killed a man in Belfast, but the murder was so cleverly done that it was never found out. Other accounts said the man she murdered in Ireland was her first husband. While in jail in Monticello, New York, Lizzie continued her violent outbursts and suicide attempts. She was ultimately shackled to the floor of her cell for the protection of herself and others. Authorities were convinced that she was a psychopathic killer. The sheriff went so far as accusing her of being Jack the Ripper. Recent investigations show that Mrs. Halliday is in all probability connected with the famous Whitechapel murders. It has been proved that she was in Europe at the time. She frequently refers to the subject both when she is in possession of her mental faculties and when she is raving. Mrs. Halliday is constantly speaking of these murders. That was the sheriff then. But we know that Jack the Ripper wasn't a woman. Crowds from all over New York State came to Monticello to watch Lizzie's trial that June. Many treated the occasion as a holiday and brought their children along. Judge Edwards had to remind the spectators that a courtroom was not a place of amusement and threatened to clear the courtroom if the levity continued. The case against Lizzie was circumstantial but strong. Her attorney did little to challenge the testimony of prosecution witnesses, confident that Lizzie would be acquitted by reason of insanity. Several doctors from the asylums where Lizzie had been kept testified that she was insane. The prosecution rebutted with medical experts testifying that Lizzie was not insane. Many people expressed the opinion that she had been acting the whole time. In the end, the jury believed the prosecution and convicted her of first-degree murder. Verdict, first-degree murder. Aftermath, Lizzie was sentenced to death by electrocution on August the 6th. She would have been the first woman to be executed in the electric chair. But New York Governor Flower, on the evidence of a commission formed to judge her sanity, commuted her sentence to life in prison. Lizzie was sent to the Matawan State Asylum, where she continued causing trouble with suicide attempts, escape attempts, and assaults on attendants. Eventually, she settled into her life at the asylum and even appeared in plays produced by the inmates. After 12 years in the asylum, Lizzie became one of the most trusted patients there. Her good behavior was attributed to the attention of a young nurse named Nellie Weeks, for whom Lizzie had a great deal of affection. In 1906, Nellie planned to leave the asylum and become a private nurse. This news was devastating for Lizzie Halliday, and she threatened to kill her nurse if she tried to leave. The threat was not taken seriously, but on September 27, 1906, Lizzie followed Nellie into the lavatory, locked the door, and began stabbing her with a pair of scissors. Miss Weeks died 2 hours later. When Lizzie died in 1918, the New York Times remembered her as the woman who murdered 5 people and reiterated the description of Lizzie as the worst woman on earth. All right, hope y'all enjoyed, and see you later.